Welcome to this TED Talk about creative synergies for COVID reconciliation. My name is Rodney Tatara Stanton. I'm an accredited mental health social worker in the Australian Capital Territory. I'm very happy to be here today. Here's a little bit about my background and kind of where my perspective is on why I've decided to have this talk today about creative synergies for COVID reconciliation. COVID really taught us a lot of things. It really taught us that our social contract in these COVID times have been violently disrupted. As you can see on the slide, moral and political obligations have really been dependent upon these agreements that we have with governments, with our employment, with our health department, and with also our self-care. And what we're talking about today is creative synergies to re-engineer this social contract to really make it a new normal that is acceptable for everyone. We know what it was then. Some of us put our hands up on, let's get away from the 2021. All the violent disruptions to those social contracts that you had with your local food eatery, with a favorite restaurant, with your gym, with walking to your sports club or your community cribbage club that you did at the senior center. And what we saw was the real agreement has shifted and been different from every single person. Let's think about it. You've actually had to stay away from these places. And what does that do for our social engagement? It's definitely not a Skype or a Zoom call to reconnect in the way we wanted to before. As you can see now, that social contract, as far as our contract and agreement with health departments and government, has really shown here that this is the vaccination rate as of 2021. In August in Australia. So that is the percentage of social contract in a very small agreement with government on why it's important for us to get vaccinated. But more importantly, that social contract that connects us, that agreement, that moral and political judgment that we want to be part of that. So what do I mean by creative synergies? Well, what I mean, as you can see in this pie chart, the cross in multiple industries with hospitality, with bricklaying, with metalworks, with car production, with housing. It is really disrupted, and you can see all the different slivers of our life that surround our communities in industry. And there's a lot of us, I'm guilty of it, that we had these industries that we thought, doesn't really affect us much. But what we found out is those are our community members, those are our family members. Those are people that we love and care about, and what is the fabric of our community that keep the motor running. Some of you are in employment or volunteering or studying, and how those social contracts have really shifted to the online learning space. Or our social and family gatherings. There's multiple countries internationally that how they gathered and collected each other or do rituals, rites of passage, has really been violently disrupted with snap lockdowns. And not being able to connect or look after Nan or make sure that the family has enough food and water. Really important too is those beliefs about government and health departments. You saw the vaccination slide and what that meant and what that agreement is. But think of all the other agreements on, is it safe to go to the shops? Is it safe to go to the doctor to get a COVID test? And those type of things. And really important is those self-care limitations that had come upon all of us. Everyone had the home gym, hopefully, or trying to do something to really physically interact and do things despite being in our home. And for those that were quarantined for 14 days or more, a real break in what is meaningful for us, but also what is our new agreement? What makes it okay to get back out? So what do we do about it now? Well, really important is identifying our grief response. A lot of in the therapy speak has been making sure we know where we're at in ourselves on the cycle of grief, and making sure that if we recognize it, doesn't mean we need to accelerate and get through those cycles quicker, but really knowing where we're at and knowing how we play our part to re-engineer that social contract. with others, with government, with family, and everything else that made our life whole before COVID slapped us in the face. Really important is those destructive thinking. There's the offensive type of destructive thinking where people are triggering to us. The news media, the family member tells us something, a politician said this, or someone at work has said, we can do this now. Well, a lot of us are saying, well, I'm not sure I'm in agreement with that person's moral code, or that's political, or it's a moral issue. I mean, it's really, really usurped a lot of things that we had a general connection and contract with each other to do it. So coming to grasp with that level of grief and where we're at and what stage you're at as an individual or as a community, identifying that constructive, destructive thinking that you may or may not have on building our way out. A lot of us are reliant on governments and health departments to tell us, hey, this is the phase to reintegration. And more importantly, once that's really put into a simple term and something that's clear for us, and we have it for our own mind and our own social networks and communities that we engage with, then we can build that new balance or new orientation to how we can navigate those spaces safely, but also make sure that we still meet the brief with everyone else we're engaging with. That's where the acceleration and that creativity comes to us, to synergize with that community landscape on how we're engaging in the social contract again and agreement, and getting that across industry, across the pie chart, to make sure it really sticks, to make sure we can have some empathy for those industries that have been brutally impacted. And that's when the real magic starts to happen, that free associative environment to really blossom on what the new contract is. And the roadmap out seems very simple for me to say and stand on the stage and say, this is what this is. But really important in that first phase of grief, recognizing where you're at, maybe recognizing with people that you care about where the community is at in this place. Recognizing that constructive or destructive thinking and making sure we are at peace with that and reconciled it for ourselves. It's very hard to go outside to do our thing if we haven't reconciled individually before we can start to connect and navigate other people's social contract. They're wearing a mask or they're not wearing a mask, they're vaccinated or aren't vaccinated. And then once we are at peace with that and we build ourselves on what our foundation is, then we can start that new orientation, start weaving through, start looking at what your fundamental values are that connected you with those industries before they were disrupted. And maybe those apply now, maybe they don't. But what you can see is when you know your fundamental values, what you feel in your gut, is really looking at that, honing in on it, and that's where you can start to accelerate your engagement, use that creativity, use that, I think this industry, something might help, this is something I might do, or how I might engage with them, even though I can't visit their shop. This is something I might do to support that local business owner or community agency, giving out food pantries, really making sure that we're connected with that in some way better than we did before, and being more creative on how we can restructure that together. And that's where the exciting part happens, that free associative environment. Now, these four fundamental things, your physical, your mental, your interconnectedness, and your balance and respect, is fundamental to how we freely associate, to generate new ideas, to get excited again about what we can do in the community with these industries, and make sure we set the can't over here for a time being, and start to navigate with people a new domain on why it's important to re-engineer that social contract. So free associative environments, let me be clear, is getting you 15 to 20 minutes a week that you can physically engage with something that's safe and part of the wider social contract in your local area, and making sure that you do that without a demand on others, without a demand from others. This is your time to freely create. Same in your mental space. This is not necessarily the jog. This is the targeting of what you need mentally to get that peace and calm and safety so you can be creative and you're not in that fight or flight mode that COVID really slammed at all of us. Someone's come home. Have they washed their hands? Have they changed their clothes? What do I need to do? The third part is that interconnectedness. Now, I know those of you watching out there have the Zoom and Skype and Teams fatigue, but I can tell you that the interconnectedness means a lot more than just seeing someone's face. So I think it's taking that extra time, interconnecting with your local shop owner, even though you can only see part of their eyes. It's really engaging with them and being intentional, because it's important to reestablish it's safe and calm to connect to each other again. And the balance and respect is really balancing out on what you can and can't do, not overdoing it, and being kind to yourself, and making sure that you're staying grounded, avoiding that regressing or get back into that destructive, offensive, destructive behavior, and thinking about there's no mask, there's no vaccine, those things that can really spiral out of control for a lot of people. Connecting deep and meaningful way to others, writing a postcard, connecting in ways via pen and paper like we did well before the COVID times. Maintaining those empathetic boundaries. Yes, that pie chart of industry doesn't really make the garage door open, but what it does do is it makes us understand that all of those have been impacted, and we have a personal choice, and the community has a choice to engage with them in an empathetic way, to say, look, we know that's going hard for you. We can connect and build this back up together if we do it as a team and a community. And continuing to seek out new ways. When you get a bit of a clear head and you're grounded and you dealt with that grief, it's getting out of the ruts that COVID causes with snap lockdowns and changes. But more importantly, it really galvanizes those connections that we had, but we get control of creating new ones. And now that is the exciting bit. Very, very happy to come here today, and have a good rest of the day.